Hello everybody, my name is Erika, and in today's stream we'll be trying out physics in Spine that were just added this weekend, really, but like kind of secretly. Today I have the chance to let you see how the physics are going to work in Spine, and for this I have prepared a couple of projects that we can understand together how physics work. If you've never used Spine before, you can download it from the Spine website. If you've already used Spine and you didn't know about physics, just restart Spine and pick the beta version 4.2 from the Spine menu, to start using physics already. So this is the project that I have prepared that will be rigging today from scratch. I haven't worked on this before. However, I can already show you something using physics, and that was this baby here. Turn off simulation so you can see the usual way this works. If I move this around, what happens is that it normally works like this, okay? That's the standard way. Also, never do this actually in setup. We always test in animate mode. And now I'll enable the simulation of the constraints here. Now don't worry, I'll be explaining everything from the beginning. I could even move just the root because it just works this well. And we see that there's automatically a delay. All I'm doing here is moving one bone and everything follows after. I've been playing with this baby here and it's so fun. And the best part is that it only takes minutes to set up, and you can just enjoy. Now, I'm sure that some of you will ask, physics, but isn't it gonna be heavy at runtime to use? Well, full disclosure, the runtimes are not ready yet because this is a very fresh beta. But because these physics are gonna use less keys, it's actually gonna be a little bit lighter to use than the standard way of animating. So at least on this, we should have something, a constraint that we can finally use how much we want without having too much to worry about. At least this is the info that was relayed to me and it's very fresh. So we have to get some more testing on this, but this is like the latest, the freshest information. And so we have maybe our project, it is done. How do we get a physics constraint to be there? We just select the bones that we want to have physics applied to, and then once I'm satisfied, I'm gonna choose from the Spine menu, New, Physics Constraint, and boom, they have been applied. Now, they will have some defaults already applied to them. I'll let you see what happens. Already from the setup, we can see that the character is bouncing, and it will be fine as it is to use. Now let's open some of the animations that we have here. If I just delete here the keys that I already had in this animation, let's do it. Okay, you're gonna see that the hair is not supposed to move anymore, but it is still moving a little bit because it is inheriting the bouncing of the overall animation. I would love to work from the setup using the preview view. When we change something in setup, it gets applied to all your animations. Whereas since these properties of the constraint can also be keyed in animation, if I were to change these settings here in the animation, they would be applied only to the current animation. So if I go back to setup and I want to kind of tweak my constraint, my physics constraint from here, my preferred method of doing this would be, okay, to activate the walking animation where I deleted the movement, and to open here the constraints. Now the nice thing is that, finally, we can edit multiple constraints at the same time. All of these, like this, and I can start tweaking how they work. Then there's also the fact that by default it is applied to rotation when a bone has a length, and translation when the bone is a null bone. Now in the folder that I prepared called physics, I prepared a file that is called physics test. So if we open that, you're gonna see a bunch of bones. Now what do these bones do? I prepared several tests that show the different ways that this physics can work. We have all these. So I thought to better understand how this works would be very convenient to actually have something to be able to tell these various things apart. So in this default version, okay, they are just not moving. I think I don't have any settings. Yeah, there's no constraint, in fact. We can see how these defaults act differently on the various kinds of bones. So I like to compare the two kind of splits that we have of bones. So the Fibonacci split that follows the golden ratio, and the standard split that uses equally distanced parts, as well as here just a single bone, and the same example but using null bones, because null bones are also great. Now we can see this here with this kind of damping. So I can select all of them at the same time. I can set this to 15. So the damping is how much it bounces, basically, which is what this icon shows. And let's see it again. Now look at this, it's much cuter. Okay, so first of all, when we select a constraint, we actually have two sections. Okay, and we have a bunch of buttons. So we have the name of the bone that is being constrained. This is different than other constraints because usually a constraint has a target. Now in this case, there is no target, there is only the constraint bone. So that's already a major difference from other constraints. Then we have a setup section. It's gonna be the same as the setup, okay? What you change here is gonna stay the same whether in animate mode or setup mode. So we can decide if the physics are gonna affect these aspects of our bones. And we see that for bones with a length, that's gonna be rotation that is affected. Now let's select one of those, a null bone, and you can see that instead this one has translation and no rotation. And if I try to set this on, okay, now it gives me the warning because it says, hey, you're trying to get me to rotate, but I can't rotate because I have no length and so I have no reference. So what this tells us is that the length of a bone and the placement of a bone also become important in this kind of setup. And so it makes it even more important how you set your bones to get the result that you want. And you can see that despite all having the same parameters down here, they behave differently depending on the structure that you chose for your project. Okay, so let's turn off this rotation again because it's doing nothing anyway, and you see that the warning icon is gone. So we said we have these which tell a bone how much is gonna be affected by physics, and it kind of works as the setup. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn everything on to the maximum. Okay, there we go. And you see here, it's already protesting because these are the null bones, okay? And they can't be scaled or sheared. So they're kind of being like, nah, we're not gonna do that. So we can only appreciate the change on these other bones. When scale is activated, you can see the violet bone, the purple bone, that also gets scaled while following the motion. There isn't much of a change on this bone, but it gets more noticeable on settings like these. Okay, so we kind of see the difference. Let's see also some other settings now. Inertia 100, perfect. What we see, what the inertia is doing is it's try to stay in the previous position to the maximum. It's resistance to change when the bone moves. So whenever you're in doubt, press F1 to see the tooltips. Whereas when the inertia, the same inertia, is set to 0, we'll see that the bone is basically not moving. It's like we turned off physics at all. So there needs to be at least a little bit of inertia for the physics to act. So we've seen orange is maximum inertia and yellow is the minimum. Now let's switch to the next. Okay, so when the strength is instead raised to the maximum, so for example, it's actually not the maximum because we could go way stronger. This is like, I could set this to 800 and it would work. What did I change? One of the chains, okay, the middle one. And as you see, the stronger it is, the more it wants to go back very quickly to the original pose. Pay attention because with some combinations, this can create a sort of, you see, it's trying to anticipate so much that it creates this sort of movement while it is following the motion. So pay attention to the strength that you set for these. Also, I'm just showing examples here to show you minimums and maximums, but there's infinite possibilities that we're not going to cover here because otherwise I'm never going to start with the other project. And yeah, it's just to give you an idea of what these do. Okay, so that was strength set to 200. When this is set instead to the minimum, we see that the bone has lost all will to live, it has no strength. Completely the opposite of trying to anticipate the motion. So if these were puppies, the orange would be a very active one, and the green one would be one that wants to go back home. Okay, and with this comparison, let's move to the next ones. So for the next, we have damping. When the damping is raised to a very high number, what happens is that we get something that is as light as a feather. It looks like it's floating with the wind. It's kind of super nice. Here we have instead the mass set to 800, but the damping is back to 15. And here I set it to a very high number. Now what does it say? Resistance to acceleration. And what does it say? Reduces speed and oscillation. They kind of get same results, but this one, it's also controlling the oscillation. So how much it does this. Whereas this is only resisting the acceleration. So there is a difference after all. Then lastly, we have wind. Okay, which is basically setting the horizontal direction compared to the original pose. And also here the gravity, which is basically the same, but controls the vertical axis. Okay, see what happens? So I think gravity can be better appreciated when we have a null bone, because you can literally see them fall. Whereas when we have bones that have a length, they kind of stay in place because they are bound there. Then we also have these buttons here. What do they do? So simulate turns on or off the physics. Apply all physics constraint simulations. I can reset this constraint position or all of them, especially if they go crazy. Deterministic applies physics simulation in animate mode starting from frame 0. What happens is that instead of being constantly simulated, you are able to see them frame by frame and scrub and adjust the position if you so wish. If you want, here mid-animation you decide that you want the damping for these bones to be higher, okay, or have a transition, okay. Here you can change how this is gonna behave now. So if I play the animation, at first they're moving a certain way, okay, damping, bouncing a lot in the beginning of the animation and bouncing less at the end of the animation. So you can also control and key these features. Then global should mean, if I remember correctly, that this, what I change here, this parameter, is applied to all of the physics constraints and not just this one. So if I want, I can just check this. Oh yeah, it deletes the keys because it's gonna use a single key. Okay, physics damping, so it controls all of them instead of just one. So once it's global for everyone, and as you see, it also deletes the extra keys, which is super nice. Let's switch to a different project. This cutie here was supposed to always follow and rain on the pot, and then the pot would grow a flower. That was my idea. In case you've never used the mesh feature in Spine, I'm gonna explain very briefly how this can work. So if I turn the mesh setting here, I can turn any image that is an image attachment into a mesh by selecting the image, then pressing mesh, then edit mesh. Then, in this case, I'm not gonna change the structure of the mesh into something complex. We're gonna do something super basic, super simple, and I'm just gonna be generating the vertices here, okay? So it's subdividing the mesh for me. This is good enough for me. Then I'm gonna bind these so it follows 1, 2, 3 bones. Perfect. Let's just apply some physics now. Now to do this faster, I think I'm gonna filter on bones. So I'm gonna select all of these parts and also to the stem. We choose new, physics constraint, and boom, it's gonna be working. Now I'll create the testing animation because I didn't have one. I prefer to test physics by making the parts do a long movement, so I can see them in action, and then make it move. Yay! Okay, something like this maybe. Okay, so I kind of have a testing situation here, and we can see that the cloud is not following the rest. That is a matter of how the flower is going a little bit like crazy. We have to tune that. That is a matter of how we organize our bones. I remove the filter now because I got my objective. So first of all, I want the cloud to follow the pot. So it kind of, it's bugging it. It has to follow it. And to achieve that, I'm gonna reparent the cloud by pressing P and telling it to follow the pot base. Now you're gonna see that just by doing this, it's not doing anything. Why is it not doing anything? Let's see. In the setup. It's because rotation is set instead of translation. I thought it was automatic. It's not. Okay, yeah, we got some warnings. Okay, then I'm gonna select all of these constraints. I'm gonna turn rotation off. I'm gonna set this to translation, and look, now it's happy. Let's go back to animate mode. Oh, finally, it looks much better. I want them to have different speeds here so it looks more like a cloud. I could change the various constraint settings here in the setup, so some are moving more and some are moving less. In this case, a neat trick that I found out by fiddling with this was to simply reparent some bones so they would go at different speeds. So the more down a chain they are, so the more they are children basically, the more they're gonna be slowed down. And now it's moving like a cloud, it even loses some bits. First of all, I'm gonna get this to be here. It's funny because it bounces even in setup, which is, I'm not used to the bones moving of their own volition. Oh, I want to get that little movement on the face. So for this, I think I'm gonna open the preview because I want it to stay like that in the animation. It wasn't following because it didn't have the translation. I'll turn the translation on. And as you see, when it's set to the maximum, it kind of moves too much. So we can get it to move less, either by setting the inertia so it's a little less. Oh yeah, I think just setting the inertia to be less it's good enough. Yeah, that's the sort of movement that I wanted, and I only had to lower the inertia so it would follow at a slower speed. Either the cloud could anticipate the motion by having more strength. So for me, this is good enough. Then I said that I wanted to change how much the third level bones would move. We can also just get the X setting to be less. So I could turn it to be slightly less for all of the cloud parts to 50, yeah. Or I could leave it on and instead change, I set the inertia to a little less. And now it's much better. Yeah, I'm actually happy. I'm only unhappy a little bit about this one because it detaches too much. Maybe by giving it a little bit more strength and less inertia. Yes, perfect. I want to get the flower to not move like crazy like that. I forgot to do a thing, which was to smooth a little bit the weights. So let's select the stem that I did here. Yeah, I did not smooth the weights at all. I'm just gonna press in the weights view here the smooth button a few times. Okay, and now it's a little bit more curved, it's cuter. Stem, perhaps I'll just tune it so it's a little bit less on the overall length of the stem. I was considering if instead I should only tune the last part, which is the one that is bending more, but I think I want to. Yeah, so it has to move less, so I turn a little bit the inertia off. Then maybe it's a flower that is a bit lighter, then I turn the damping. Oh my, it's like it has its own life. Never mind. So if I do the damping like that, it kind of does a bow in every direction, which is very funny. No, I want the damping to be low, and instead I'm gonna be having maybe more strength. Yes, so it's a bit more rigid. Now it's comically rigid. So we can get different feelings on these flowers. Just like this. It's like it's made of wood instead of being a flower. But then it does this. Okay, I think I'm gonna change the settings just for the last two. I'll get the inertia to be less strong for these. Yeah, okay, yes, that's what I wanted. Yeah, okay. So for me, this kind of works. It is what I had in mind. Now let's also try to apply it on an actual live character.